Sorry, just making sure everything's recording. All right, cool. Yeah, we'll just get started. Uh,
Cool.
yeah. All right. Well, hi, my name is Poblete. I'm here with Mixdown Music, and yeah, I'm here talking to the incredible singer-songwriter, actor, all-around talented individual, Emily Kinney. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Yeah. First off, how are you, and where are you currently in the world?
I'm great. I'm in Los Angeles right now. So I just got back from New York. I played a little show in New York and then flew back earlier this week.
Awesome, awesome. And, I mean, I just want to jump right into the new album, Swimteam, which is beautiful, very witty, very honest songwriting, and it just felt, it tells a very vulnerable story of heartbreak. And I just want to know, like, is there like a difference between like, I don't know, the kind of anticipation of releasing personal music into the world and like when you're performing a very emotional scene when you're acting?
Is there I mean, I do find them both similar. I do think that with me for acting, there's an element of within the character revealing something about myself, something about me that can be true in if the circumstances were right, kind of almost thing, or at least being able to see from someone else's point of view how they ended up in that position or their feelings about it. So I do feel like even though with acting, you're creating a character and you're creating circumstances you haven't been in, there is an element of revealing the truth of the matter, or a truth.
Mm,
And I feel the same way with songwriting, that like it's not like necessarily I feel that way every single day, that one song, but
mm.
it is revealing the truth of how I felt in a particular moment. So yeah, for me, they do both kind of touch on that same like bit of vulnerability for sure.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I really like the album of this or the title of the album, Swim Team. Like it definitely reminds me of like, knowing that this is very much a breakup album makes me like envision this kind of relationship, feel like being in it is kind of like drowning. And I don't know,
Mm.
this idea of like the swim team capturing like the tug and pull of a relationship where it feels like no one's really winning on this in this relationship. So I want to know like how does like the title of the album reflect your overall headspace when you're writing the album?
Yeah, I mean, I think you found some of the ties that I was thinking of. Just the idea, I think there's something for swim team for me. I was on swim team as a little kid,
Mm,
and the idea of false starts of like jumping in before the gun or before the bell
mm,
and having to get out and being completely soaked and start all over again. And I think in life there's so many times when you have to kind of where you don't even get to the end to lose, like
mm.
you just kind of feel like that wasn't completed, but now I have to like start over at the beginning and jump in again. And also the idea of it being a swim meet where there's like people watching somehow, or maybe in your perceived mind there's a there's a shame involved. And so yeah, with it being a breakup album, I think the idea was like being sort of stuck in this, not even like competition, but kind of where like that you don't even know if you want to be in it anymore. There's this line that says, I kind of want to just quit swim team entirely. And that was the idea for the album was, oh, swim team. I'm in swim team.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah, and I know you just talked about it recently, but yeah, you just had a few performances
Yeah.
where being in LA and New York. How's it been being able to play these live songs or these very personal songs live, especially after writing these songs during the pandemic, which was like very isolating. Like how is being able to perform them in front of people, given these songs a new life?
Oh, it's so satisfying. I have this thing. I was just talking to my manager today about how the day after a show, I'm I have that motivation to get things done that maybe I've been putting off,
Mm,
because there's something about a show where you're seeing people in front of you receive the thing you made. It's very forward movement. It feels that way with like in a physical way. So I always feel really motivated right after shows. And also it's really satisfying too to hear people laugh or react to certain lines, particularly the song Broken Air Conditioning, people sort of getting the joke or being in on the joke, and just kind of seeing how what you've written lands with people again in a real, not over the internet, but in a face to face, like in the room kind of way is really, yeah, just satisfying and exciting.
Yeah, because I feel like, even when you're writing, I feel like even if you can make yourself laugh, like it's only like that only does so much, but like being able to see like other people like react to it, I feel like that's a whole different feeling.
Yeah, it's very motivating.
Yeah. So like when you're creating art about like very personal relationships, do you find yourself like in your songwriting staying true to your own experiences, or do you try to kind of paint a broader metaphors for like a wider audience to grasp?
Mm. Um, Even though I'm so excited about audiences, about my music reaching audiences, I I feel it's important for me as an artist to keep things somewhat personal. Um, I actually think sometimes it's the little moments and the little specific things that make people attach even more, because you're describing the room, you're describing the experience. And I think the more specific you can be, it might not be exact, rather than like broader, more general um, brush strokes, being really specific about a relationship and or about the room or about whatever it is that you're creating makes people also be able to put themselves in your position, and they can laugh at the things that are similar in their life. I just went to see a movie this weekend. It was called Cat Person, and there's a moment where she goes into this guy that she's dating. I know this is not the album, but she goes into she's just seeing his room, this guy that she's gone on one date with. And there's a moment where there's like an empty cup with like a little bit of liquid. And it's so specific, but I feel like there's so many women or anybody who like dates this person, and you're noticing all these little things about their room, and like specifically like noticing cups that haven't been put away that are like,
Yeah.
it was such a very specific thing to this story. But again, I could go, oh my gosh, I've been there, like, and specifically that cup,
Yeah.
of the empty. I don't know if you've seen the movie, but
I'm not.
sometimes I do, it's something that I go back and forth with when I do sessions, because a lot of times you're writing for a particular
Mhm.
moment, and you're encouraged to write in a broader way. And I actually think it's sometimes the more specific things that end up appealing to a broader audience,
I love that. Yeah.
for
And
the
I feel
kind
like,
of audience that I want.
yeah. And I think like the more specific things like those, like definitely, you can definitely hold on to those a lot like better than, a more broader like way of writing. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I feel like a common theme, at least like a theme throughout the album, is like this idea of like uncertainty about this relationship. And
Mhm.
like especially like the last track, which is Untitled, the way that like I was interpreting it, it kind of like coincides with like leaving the relationship. Like you leave the album like very unsure of like the place that you're in. And so I want to know like what was the intention for, placing that song as the last track and leaving it as an untitled track?
Yeah, the intention for that song was, it's, if you listen to the song, it's very hopeful.
Mhm.
I wrote that song about dating someone online. You can kind of tell it's about the pandemic, because it's like, oh, we're only talking through the computer. Like, I'd love to meet you in person someday. I'd like to, maybe the world's ending, but maybe this is the beginning of something new, and that would be nice. And the idea is that like that is the end of, you know that the old relationship is the hope for something new, and the investing in a new person, hoping that that could become romantic love, and not knowing though for sure. And
Yeah.
so that's why it's untitled, unfinished, you know maybe similar to what's that, 365 days of summer, or
Yeah.
like, and then he meets autumn, and it's sort of like the beginning of a new
Yeah.
movie in a way. So that was the intention for that song.
Yeah, so it's like the start of a new chapter, but you don't even know what the title of the next chapter is going to be yet. I like
Yeah,
that. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And all right, so when you're acting, I presume, the process is more of a telling of someone else's stories through like their words, but through your performance. But with music, I know it's like more you individually telling your story. So I want to know like what helps you shift from one way of storytelling to the next. And do you ever find yourself using the skills that you've mastered from acting in your music and vice versa?
Definitely. I think that especially when it comes to performing my music, I think I've learned a lot from being in theater about
Mm,
feeling ready to take the stage and just like how I conduct myself. Um, Being on stage, I think I have like the theater training is really helpful for that in particular. Although it is very different venues, you're interacting in a different way with the audience, where like in theater, you're sort of not breaking the
mm,
wall really. Um, but yeah, I mean, and even in preparation for shows, I'll think back to how I prepare for being on set, and getting ready to truly like know everything so well that you don't have to think about it. Um, I think that's really important. So there's definitely like crossover in like training, I guess.
yeah.
And your voice, saving your voice. One thing I do feel like good about when I'm not touring this album, but um in the past when I've been on tour, knowing my limits with my voice and stuff.
Mm,
Having theater training has been really helpful
mm,
for that. Um, but I try to take on, it's a relief. It's a relief when it's my own project, because there is a little bit of like, well, if I mess up or if I change a word or something, it's mine. Like I wrote it. It can be exactly how I want. Where when you are an actor, you are fitting into someone's bigger picture. So I can practice all day in my room one way and be like, this is the way I'm doing it. And
yeah.
then I get to set and they might be like, ooh, but our camera's going to be over here. So if you do that performance that way, it's not really gonna show you really are fitting into someone else's, much bigger picture.
Yeah.
And so collaboration just becomes, it's always important. It's important in music too. But yeah, I mean, I try to learn the words as well as though that they are my words and I'm thinking of them.
Mm,
So I think having the experience with music and knowing that the song can be so personal and exactly what I did, and I have memories of when I wrote those lines and why I wrote them, that same kind of personal attention also needs to happen for the acting roles I do. So it's really important to me to know the lines so well I don't have to think about them, to have thought about what did my character, when I said like all the things, what my character wants, what I did that day before the scene, what I'm doing after this scene, like knowing, like really knowing inside and out, um, as much as possible who the character is. And in fact, in the way that I can almost just like put
mm,
myself in their position, slip it on, where I'm
yeah.
not even thinking about creating a character. I'm just living in the moment.
Yeah, so like as much as like yourself, with your music and everything, like you have to do that process also with like whoever you're playing as a actor. I like
Yeah.
that.
And it's
Yeah.
a lot of, for me, it's a lot of repetition,
Mm,
so that it's something where I can just be in the moment and
yeah.
be experiencing what the characters experiencing, but all the other stuff is almost intuitive. It's
Mhm.
almost, you know, um, automatic.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Um, yeah, I know you had a podcast where you talk to a lot of musicians, like local natives, Silver Sun Pickups, and other artists about like their creative process. I want to know like what's the difference between discussing the creative process with musicians, than actors, and what is like some of the most insightful advice you've been given, about telling your story through music.
Hmm. The difference between, you know, um, I think one reason that I created the podcast was because there is this thing that can happen with musicians is you kind of get into a bubble of like, either if you write by yourself, then you're kind of by yourself a lot, except for maybe your manager. And like, if you have a band once in a while, or if it's your band, it's you and your band. And you can sort of feel like you're on this journey by yourself. And I felt like, and like, I'm such a fan. And so many of my best friends are musicians. So in the time that I created that podcast, I was feeling very isolated, and very like on my own in my musical endeavors. And I think that having a place where we could chat about our different process and what we were going through with like management, or just even hearing their whole story, it definitely makes you feel less alone. And it kind of creates a community. Like there's definitely people in that podcast that I've kept in touch with and people I haven't, but it's like, it kind of was like this opportunity to create a real connection. I think that that's really important to have a group of other artist friends, um, and then for acting, you kind of have a built-in group, right? Like for Walking Dead, let's say, everyone was sort of going through a similar thing, being on the same kind of set, and we have these like connections already. So I do think when you're auditioning, it's that same thing where especially now with self-tapes and you're not going into the casting office, it's similar to music where you're kind of creating things in a bubble and you're not really getting to connect with other actors. But I think there is, if you're working a lot, there can be a little more opportunity for community with other actors. So I guess when it comes to like approaching, I wonder if that answered your question. Like when it comes to like approaching, I guess when it comes to approaching community within being, an actor or an artist.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And I mean, I know you've like cited, in a few interviews, Jenny Lewis as one of like, your biggest inspirations.
Yeah.
Like, what do you find about her music and her songwriting that resonates really the most with you? And, being such a fan of hers, like, what do you envision, like, having the opportunity to eventually work with her? Like, what do you think that would be like?
I mean, in my mind, I don't even know if, I mean, it'd be cool to like sing a song with her, like a duet kind of thing. But I
Yeah.
also think it'd just be cool to tour with her and see what her process is for performing shows and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm also happy to just be a fan, and I think the reason her music inspires me is because it feels very honest. It feels very like specific situations. She's very but I also find that it's really fun and like silly sometimes, like even Puppy in a Truck,
Yeah.
is like a little like fun. So even if she's talking about something sad, there's an element of it's all kind of fun, I
Yeah.
feel. Um and that really appeals to me. I also just like that she's older than me and there aren't a lot of like like I feel like there's a lot of ladies over here, my dog. Hi.
Oh.
You can't see her, but like just having someone to look up to, I think is good. I mean there's a lot of artists that I love that are younger than me too, but she's very much like still putting out new music, and that is just inspiring to me.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so one thing I do want to talk about, I actually visited Nebraska past summer. I went to the Maha Festival. I don't know if you've ever
Yeah.
been, but yeah, and I learned a lot about like the history of like, the underground punk scene and Saddle Creek Records and everything. But I want to know, like, do you feel like Nebraska gets overlooked in regards to the output of music that they put out from like Bright Eyes to Cursive? And what would you say like the music that comes from Nebraska makes it so unique?
I don't know. I think specifically Saddle Creek Records, like honestly, when I grew up in Nebraska, I wasn't aware of the music scene, except for maybe like the punk. I remember a band called JV All Stars that I used to go see. Like the more like punk pop kind of scene was a local scene um that I was into a little bit.
Yeah.
But when I was growing up, I was really listening to my parents' music, which was like classic rock. And then I was really listening to um straight up like pop music. There's a station called Sweet 98
Mm.
that was just all the Mariah Carey, all the, top 40, Casey Kasem, top 40, MTV Beach House. That's what I was listening to, TRL.
Yeah.
But then it was when I got to college that I was really exposed to Saddle Creek Records and the Omaha music scene. And that was through my friend Brooke, who was my roommate. And she grew up in Omaha. So she and her now husband was like a musician in bands. And so she had a whole other connection to that scene. And so I don't know. I think you can make special, beautiful music anywhere. Yeah, I think it's specifically for whatever reason that label seemed to really curate amazing, amazing artists. I've never met any, like, I don't know who created that label, or I don't really know a lot about it. I'm just a fan, you know? But that music started to really shape how I was writing. So yeah, and I just happened to also be from Nebraska. I guess.
Yeah. How would you say like, your music kind of incorporates that, like those Nebraska roots into your own music? How do you feel? Like,
Yeah, I mean, especially now, not so much when I was first writing songs, I feel like I was really, now this album is really focused on a breakup and relationships.
yeah.
But supporting character, I feel like is an album where I really take a look more at my family and where I came from. And my next album too will be obviously it's not finished yet, but I get a lot more into Wayne, Nebraska, just the life that I kind of the place that I come from, you know. So I think it shows up in my writing, but maybe when I was first writing, I was very focused on sort of the love songs, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. So like you feel like as like you grow as a songwriter, like you kind of incorporate like, the different elements of like, where you've been and
Hmm.
different like environments into your songwriting. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's more to explore. I think at first I really used songwriting as a way to get my side out, especially when it came to romantic relationships. And then as I've worked my way through that, there's not as much to say about that. And then there's stuff to say about where, other things. And I go, well, what else do I want to get my side out on? And then it's, maybe something about where I came from, or exploring the genetics of my family and that kind
Mm,
of thing. So
that's cool. Yeah. Uh,
yeah.
yeah. Pivoting a little bit, but like, yeah, so being in the stage of your career, how do you feel like when people initially recognize you from your acting roles, when you've kind of been concentrating on your music career as of late?
Oh, I love it. I
Yeah.
mean, I feel like it doesn't matter how people find the music. And, a lot of characters I've played, particularly Beth, she
Mhm.
sang.
Yeah.
And so people are really able to like get in there and explore the music because she sang, and specifically Beth sang Tom Waits songs, which are very like folk, storytelling songs. So I think whatever connects you to a person works. Yeah. And I also think it's interesting, a lot of shows I've been on, um, maybe people came to shows because they wanted to meet Beth, but then I've had people say to me after a show, "Well, this is the first concert I've gone to." Like they're not your traditional music fans. And so
Yeah.
there is a little bit of satisfaction of sort of like, oh, maybe they'll go to more like
Yeah.
folk pop
Yeah.
shows, or whatever.
Yeah. So definitely like Beth was like a segue for them into, at least like your music and then maybe like other, genres of
Yeah.
music. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah. I mean, yeah, being on that show too, like did you ever like imagine the show finding like a new life even beyond like the initial series and like how impactful it's been like throughout all these years?
Yeah, I mean, when I first started, I had no idea what was to come. By the time I left, as far as it being like such a massive worldwide
Yeah.
phenomenon, phenomenon,
Yeah.
phenomenon. And but then by the time I left, I I knew that the writers and the producers had their mindset on more, more, more. So I knew there'd be, more spin-offs, more seasons. Um, everything, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, definitely like, I know like your songwriting is definitely like a lot that I don't know, when you're songwriting, you definitely teach yourself a lot about your own, person. But what kind of lessons did you learn, channeling the character of Beth for so many years?
Kind of lessons.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just being on the set, I think I really learned something about, I mean, this doesn't have to do so much, well, but with Beth a little bit, being a really good listener, you know, I feel like Beth didn't get to do a lot the first season. You know, I had like the but I became a very good, it's a very great set to be on, where everyone is so collaborative and involved, and learning those lessons about setting the bar really high
Yeah.
for my acting has made me an asset to the shows I went to later.
Mm.
So being surrounded by other actors who were there to be their very best set a bar for me. And then in addition to just being Beth, I got to listen a lot, and I feel like listening is a huge part of acting, um, that people sometimes don't pay attention to, especially if you're a newer actor. You know, you're like, my line, you know, like the joke about like my line, bullshit, my line. You know, like there's a joke about that, like going through the script and, you know, only highlighting your line, you know. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, just like really being a collaborative player. And yeah, so I think that's, yeah, setting the bar high. I think it served me in the shows after, where maybe there wasn't as much of a process, you know, where you just show up on set and there wouldn't be much of a rehearsal, or which
Mm.
is fine because some shows just don't have that built into their schedule. But
Mm.
because I had that with Walking Dead, I made sure to do that myself, you know?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I
Mhm.
love that. Yeah. Um, yeah, I know this is something like, it's a very hot topic to talk about, but like as we've seen like a huge shift, in the way people who work in entertainment, are valued, from like, the WGA and, the SAG strike and everything, if you're
Mm.
able to speak on it, what do you hope like, comes to fruition with a deal, made for actors? And do you think like even artists in the music industry will eventually like follow suit and try to, renegotiate terms, like with labels
Yeah.
and stuff? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I'm really hoping that we come to a decision soon. Obviously, I'm in SAG, so I'm on strike. But big companies have to remember who actually makes the content. You know, if you own Spotify, if you own
Yeah.
Netflix, like, yes, you created this platform, but there's nothing to put on your platform unless you have people writing shows and making shows and being in the shows.
Mhm.
And so paying those people properly is extremely important. Um, and I also think with music, your question about music, I don't know if we'll ever see the kind of coming together that you see with the WGA and you see with SAG-AFTRA
Yeah.
in the music side, because the music business is set up very differently. Um, you know, and I think it's going to take, rather than people coming together, because different, you know, we have unions that have been set in place for a really really long time for actors and writers, and for other various people on the set that work on TV and movies. But with music, there really aren't those kinds of unions, same kind of labor unions in place. um I think what it's going to take is more individual
Mm.
artists deciding what their bar is, what they're willing to put up with, what they're willing to make their music. Are they willing to make their music for free? Are
Yeah.
they not? You know, I think it's going to take people individually
Mm.
um setting the bar for themselves of what they're willing to, you know, put up with.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. It's definitely like a very personal thing and just kind of what works for the individual artists. Yeah, that makes
Mhm.
sense. Um, Yeah, well, I have a couple more for you before I let you go. Yeah. So going back, to the album a little bit, there's a song titled Everything on TV where you describe having everything, every streaming service, available.
Yeah.
I want to know like what shows are you currently watching, and are there any shows like right now that you wish you could be a part of?
Ooh, that's a great question. I'm watching Invasion on
Oh,
Apple about
yeah.
the aliens.
Yeah.
I love it. I sort of watch one show and then move on. And so that's kind of where my head has been. And then I've watched Morning Show from the beginning. And so I'm going to start that because I saw that they have like 3 new episodes out.
Yeah.
So Morning Show, Invasion. Um, what else? I want to start Yellowstone.
Okay.
Um, but I haven't yet. I loved Succession. So being on a show like that would be awesome.
Oh yeah.
There's so many kinds of shows I want to be on. I want to be on like, you know, funny stuff. I want to do more drama. I love anything about aliens. I mean, so
Yeah.
so I have this dream of playing a doctor, like that I need to play like Meg Ryan in City of Angels. Like I have this sort of dream of that kind of role for some reason. It like comes up to me in meditation. So if anybody has a doctor role for me to that's
Yeah. I mean, it definitely could happen. Yeah, you never know.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I feel like with TV, like there's so many different kinds of shows being made now and like so many different voices being heard. So yeah, I'm sure, someone would love to have you play a doctor in one of their shows. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's sort of like a little dream. Um when I was little, I loved Quantum Leap and the new I don't know if that ended up getting picked up for another season or not. I think it did, but that would be cool to like guest star in Quantum Leap. I don't know. Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. Well, yeah. Shout out to you.
I
Yeah.
love it. Yeah, I love anything period too. Like I was thinking about I want to watch Yellowstone mostly because I want to see there's all these spin-offs of it. And
Yeah.
like I always love when you get to like wear a cool costume. So
Yeah. Yeah, definitely like a different like time period. I feel like, yeah,
yeah,
that's
I feel like
perfect
I
for you.
fit in really
Yeah.
well in different, like period pieces time.
For
Yeah.
sure. For sure. I can definitely see it. Yeah. All right. Well, I have one more question. Yeah. But at this point in your career, which side do you feel like has been more creatively fulfilling, the acting side or the music side? And what do you hope, the future looks like for both these endeavors? And do you wish like, to some day, combine the two worlds, perhaps like musical theater again or yeah.
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 I mean, one way that I wish I could combine them is like so much of music for me is writing the music and
Mm,
I do write scripts as well. And so something where I can combine like I'm working on a script now that has country music. So something where I can be doing both the television side and incorporate my music would be so satisfying. But yeah, I mean, I mostly feel it's all been better than I ever could have imagined as
mm,
like a little kid moving from Nebraska to New York City. So it's already been more than I thought, but so I'm already satisfied. And even just like I used to think, oh, I want to make one album someday, like one
yeah.
album, and this is my 5th album. So I do feel I'm in this time in my life where I feel sort of like proud of even making the album. But
Mm.
I would like to be able to do bigger shows and yeah, I mean there's so many more. I have lists of dreams, so to just keep being able to do that and to make my living as an artist to me is the best. So
I love that. Well, no matter what you do, we'll definitely be here,
mhm.
encouraging you and just, appreciating everything you do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, that's all I have for you today. It
All
was
right,
an honor talking with you and
so nice
congrats
to
on the
talk to
album.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thanks,
Cool.
you too.
All right.
Bye.
Take it easy.